Next from Chicago, our contributing correspondent Jeff Berkowitz talks with an expert, Miguel Silva, about the growing economic and cultural ties between the United States and South America. This runs about 30 minutes.
Watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game, and we will be doing lots of politics and public policy this evening because, as I promised, we have as our guest Miguel Silva. He is the head of your own consulting firm?
Yes, I'm a senior managing director of a political consulting firm. We sold that to an American firm called FTI Consulting.
Okay, so you're now part of FTI Consulting.
So I'm now part of FTI Consulting.
All right, and most importantly, as I said, he is a fellow. We'll talk about that as to what it means, but he's a fellow at the Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago. You can see our surrounding is a little different than our tame studio. We're sitting here in a conference room on the second floor of the Institute of Politics, located on 57, near the corner of 57th and Woodlawn in Hyde Park. David Axelrod is the director of this august institution. And so, Miguel, just start out, because the most important thing we're probably thinking of, people are focusing a lot on Obamacare as we tape this on December 4th, 2013. They think of foreign policy about Iran and, what was the United States deal a good one? Are we going to be less or more safe in terms of the nuclear capability of Iran? I have to say, I think most people would say the furthest thing from their mind would be the foreign policy or relations of the United States with Latin America, South America, with the exception of immigration and the problems we have or don't have at the border. So do I have that right, and do they have that right, or should people in America be more focused on something you know a great deal about, the relationship between the United States and South America and Latin America?
Well, Jeff, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm really glad to be here. You've been in a couple of my seminars, and you've seen the excitement that talking about Latin America brings on within students in the University of Chicago, mostly Americans. And I think it is because it's a fascinating time in the region. I think Latin America is full of great news. Latin America is full now of success stories. And I think that in U.S.-Latin America relations, something like the prodigal son happens. Because we're the normal ally, because we're there, because we're part of what used to be called in the Cold War the backyard.
When you say we, who are you referring to?
Latin America. The Latin American allies.
How many countries are in Latin America?
Well, the Organization of American States, which unites all of them, including Canada and the U.S., has 34 members. If you add Cuba, which is not a member of the OAS, you will find that non-U.S. Canada Americas is about 33 countries. Now, some of them are Anglo-Caribbean. But you're talking about economies.
You're Colombian.
I'm Colombian, yes. I was
born
in Bogota, raised in Bogota. Okay. And for example, I'll start with that example, Jeff. I think it's very interesting. Because I have lived a life where when I was 30 years old and I was in government, I had bodyguards and a bulletproof car. And anyone who was trying to be in government was risking his life.
This is when you were 30 years old.
Yeah, at
so simply
92.
20 years ago.
Yes.
The Bill Clinton era that
yes,
started
exactly.
the Bill Clinton era. Okay.
In 2000, I went back. I came to the States for some years and worked for a political consulting firm. I went to run a magazine, and there and then, I had a bulletproof car, and my wife had a bulletproof car, and my kids could not walk in the streets. Now, 10 years on, 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, you have a country where I walk to the office, my kids walk to school, or not to school because it's far away, but they do walk to college, the medium.
So it's much safer.
It's much safer.
What happened? What changed?
Well, a lot of things happen. I think that there has been a big effort of bringing people out of poverty with stronger economies. There has been a huge collaborative effort between the U.S. and Colombia. And it's an interesting effort because it's been a bipartisan effort from the U.S. and a success story in the war against drugs. The guerrillas and the cartels have been either completely eliminated or weakened. There's an ongoing peace process with the last guerrilla in Colombia. Now you have booming cities and you have 5% growth every year. 1 year ago, the Wall Street Journal voted on Medellin as the world's most innovative city in the world against Tel Aviv and Sydney.
Oh, okay.
And if you go there, I mean, 20 years ago, you could not say, and this was a colleague of mine who's running the Center for Latin America at the Atlantic Council used this line today in the seminar. He said, 20 years ago, you could not say the word Medellin without the word cartel, and now you cannot say the word Medellin without the word success.
So there's no main cartel
Without the
anymore.
word, no.
That cartel is
no.
gone.
No, the main cartels today are in Mexico. Colombia does play, unfortunately, a role in that chain, but I think as time goes by, that will be less the case. But I think my point here was there's excitement to find in Latin America. Brazil is a booming economy. Brazil is the sixth or seventh economy in the world. Mexico is the 14th economy in the world. Colombia and Argentina are 26 and 30.
So these are a block of countries that there's some affinity with in terms of what democracy and also much friendlier to the West, much friendlier to the United States. Would you say?
Yes.
Would you say that Brazil? Would they be in that category?
Yes. Yes.
Argentina,
Very
Colombia. What else? What other
I'll
countries?
differentiate a little bit because I think you have 570 million people in Latin America, which are Western and share the same beliefs that the Americans have. So suddenly, you have a neighborhood that's energy rich and that shares your main values. Now, having said that, there I would say at least two big dividing blocks in Latin America.
Okay.
One is clearly U.S. ally, clearly free traders, clearly pro-democracy, with own checks and balances in their power systems. Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Chile. That's the new alliance for the Pacific. But they're not only
what are they? Mexico,
Colombia, Peru, and Chile.
And Argentina you don't put in there?
No. So these four signed an alliance that will not only be free trade, that's easier, it's going to mean the free movement of people among those four
Something
countries.
like the European Union.
Exactly.
And do those countries all tend to tilt left in terms of
Yes.
being more socialistic, less
Yes.
capitalistic?
Yes, it's what you could call a new populism, new wave of populism. They differ
Where
between
does
each
Brazil
other
fall?
also.
You didn't put them in either
So
block, did they?
Brazil is an interesting case, Jeff, because Brazil is playing like now China is looking for their role in the as a global player. You see Petrobras.
Recently named to do the Olympics in what year?
Well, they
coming
do the Olympics and the World Cup, the soccer
What year-
World
what
Cup
year will-
next year.
Is it next year?
Next year is
2014?
the World Cup.
And then the
I know
Olympics,
because I'm planning to go.
Okay. Olympics are 2016, is that what it is?
I'm not sure when the
Okay.
Olympics
But it's
are.
coming up
I follow
there.
the soccer.
You did. Did you bring your soccer ball?
Yeah, the soccer ball, well, you lost the soccer ball.
Did you lose it?
It's around here.
We're going to get Miguel back here.
You know,
Okay.
one great thing that happened with soccer is that the Colombia team is in. So I don't know if we're going to win, but we are clearly a part of
you a
the
big soccer
World Cup.
player?
I mean, not a big
But
soccer
it is big.
player.
Soccer is big in Latin America. and
Soccer
South
is
America.
huge in South America. Huge in Latin America. Baseball is bigger in the Caribbean, and there are some great Colombian baseball players.
We were talking about Brazil, and you're saying Brazil is sort of trying to find its identity, right?
Well, Brazil's.
Are they more capitalist or socialist?
Brazil
Where would you
is
put 'em?
totally
Conservative.
capitalist,
Okay.
with two socialist presidents, Lula and Dilma.
But it's
very
totally
socialist.
capitalist, even though they have
It is.
socialist president.
It is
Why
mostly.
is that?
It is because I think that what they've done is a very aggressive public policy of support for the poor with good social programs, but they have kept mostly the market economy that
Is it a
has-
democracy?
It is a complete democracy.
Are all those countries you mentioned before in the bloc associated with Colombia, Peru, Chile, Colombia, and Mexico, right?
Yes.
Or are those are democratic
Yes.
countries,
Yes.
democracies?
The four of them. Very
the other
strong.
countries all tend to be less democratic.
The other
and
countries,
more
I would say,
authoritarian.
I would take Argentina out. Argentina has had a traditional democracy. They run into frequent waves of populism.
But in general, it's
But in
more
general, it's very
democracy.
democratic. Then you have Venezuela, who's completely destroyed all democratic rights of the minorities
Although they
and
have
the
a strong
opposition.
opposition. I
They
heard
have
that
a-
in a seminar.
yes,
I learned
that is
that
true.
year. Look, folks, you should just interrupt to say these seminars are run by the fellows. The fellows generally come here for a day or two for 10 successive weeks. Okay, but Miguel is a little different. He's been here almost all the time for 10 weeks. A little bit because of the distance going back and
That's
forth.
correct.
It's not like going to Washington.
I'm a Hyde Park neighbor right now.
So you've become a Hyde Park native in a sense, okay? But these fellows run seminars at least once a week where they meet usually at lunch. Actually, it's great. And this is open to the public. It's mostly undergrads who will come here, but occasionally you get alumni.
You get a lot
and
of grads, and it's interesting, Jeff. You get members of the community too. I'll give you one interesting example. When the government shut down, I had a bunch of people from EPA coming to my seminar.
Oh, because they had nothing to do because they shut it down. And they had want to do something interesting.
Yes, that's
But I mean,
correct.
if they had their choice, if they didn't have to go to work at the EPA every day, they would be here.
Yes.
They wouldn't be playing soccer,
That
much
is
as they
correct.
might like it. They wouldn't be having coffee somewhere. They would be coming to a seminar conducted by Miguel Silva, right?
Well,
At
thank
the
you, Jeff.
Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago in Hyde Park. No, but very seriously, folks, these are great programs. I've gone to a number of them. Amy Walter has been from the national editor of the Cook Political Report, is a fellow.
She's fantastic.
She's come on our show. We've had you on now. We had, Steve
Steve Edwards.
blanked on his name for a moment. And
Did you interview Robin Carnahan, the former
missed her,
Secretary of State of
yeah.
Missouri?
No, but I would like to. I did get to see her.
She's fantastic.
She had, who was the U.S. Senator who was out with
Vin
her?
Weber.
No, there's another U.S. Senator, Democratic Senator, who was at a program.
Oh, that
with her.
was probably Tom Daschle. He
No.
was here too.
Okay, but
as
you're
a-
mentioning
as a
all these
guest.
people. So we're giving you a flavor of this is happening right here in Hyde Park, and folks should drop in. There are these they have national speakers coming. So you have a speakers program, you have a fellows program, and you have an internship program. But back to your story, back to what you're talking about, these two blocks. So you have the block of Colombia, Mexico, Peru, and
Chile.
Chile. And that block is called
It's called the Pacific Alliance.
Pacific Alliance. So, and that's
Which
how
is-
long has that existed?
No, it's starting,
Just
and
now.
it's
Okay.
more a process than it is a reality. It's signed, but a lot of things have to happen until there is free movement of peoples among
And how
those
does it
four countries.
interact with
It's
the United
200
States?
million people. Can you imagine?
And how does it interact with you? How does that affect the United States?
I think the point there it's a huge opportunity for the United States.
For trading?
Because for not only for trading, I think the United States should promote success stories in the region. I think the United States should do what it's starting to do, which is treat the Latin American countries as not equals, but as grown-ups,
As peers.
as peers, and have more constructive conversations. The United States could completely change, for example, its energy balance if it were more constructive with Latin America. It could have most of its resources coming from the region. I mean, there's enormous opportunity there, I think, for
What should you do?
Americans there.
What specifically, if you were king, and you could say to either the Barack Obama, president, or the Congress, the House or the Senate, what would you advise them to do to implement what you're talking about?
Well, the first thing is, I would say, you're too worried in the urgent, which you should, of course. I mean, Pakistan and Syria and Iran, that's the urgent. But deal with the urgent. But start looking at what's also important. You have 570 million people that look up to the United States.
In South America and in Latin
In
America.
Latin America. And if you poll all around Latin America, even in those countries where the government is anti-American, the citizens are pro-American.
They are. Why? What is it about them?
Because the U.S. has had enormous influence in as a culture, and of course there's television, there's movies, but there's also the news. I mean, we're in the orbit of the empire. I mean, we're in the orbit. It's like when the Roman Empire and you have Judea or Antioquia, or we're in the orbit. We're there. We share the beliefs the main beliefs we share, the U.S. and Latin America share the beliefs of the power of the people, government by the people, that, minorities have rights.
And
And
so what does it do with these other countries, this bloc that's less friendly?
that's interesting.
What's the name of that bloc again?
It's ALBA.
Okay.
And there's,
And ALBA includes?
there are a couple of other ideas
This is
coming up.
Venezuela, this is
That's
Ecuador.
Venezuela, Ecuador, Nicaragua, Cuba, Bolivia. Those are the most important ones.
Can the United States do anything with Venezuela? Can
Well,
it help? There is, as I mentioned in a seminar you were conducting, I learned about the opposition in Venezuela. It has come very close in some elections. to
1.5%.
Right. I don't think people
Margin.
realize that. So this autocratic regime of first Hugo Chavez and now his brother, is that right?
Nicolas Maduro, no. But
colleague.
a friend of his brother.
Right, a friend of his brother. They almost got toppled. So could the United States do anything, or could they get involved in helping topple them, or would that be counterproductive?
I think the United States has to build bridges with the people of Latin America, besides dealing with the governments of Latin America.
The people. Well, how do they do that?
With the people. Well,
Specifically.
I think there are many ways to do it. I think there are many ways of promoting friendship between countries, of promoting investment and information and education exchanges and scholarships, and a lot of.
And they can still do this with the ALBA countries, even
Yes.
though they're hostile
Yes.
to the United States.
Yes.
The
Now,
governments are hostile.
in political
the people aren't.
terms, at times it's good that the United States doesn't do anything, because when the states, for example, would say, we like the opposition in Venezuela because they are democratic. The government is not democratic. It'll hurt the opposition. It will not help the
But
opposition.
what about, there's a lack of freedom in these countries. We have the technology. We used to have radio-free Europe. So when we had these Iron Curtain countries in Eastern Europe, which were dominated by the old Soviet Union, we could bust through there.
Yeah.
We'd have radio-free Europe. We could give these people news. Radio-free Europe was not looked at as biased propaganda from the United States. It was looked at as balanced news.
Well,
Could we do something like that?
I don't think that's
or is that
not-
not needed?
I don't think.
Do
Well,
these
first of all, I
does
don't think
Venezuela
yes.
have a free press? I don't think so, right?
Well, it's two questions.
Yeah.
So one, does Venezuela have a free press?
Right.
It has a free press, but the government has taken over most of the electronic media outlets.
Well, how can it be free if they've taken it?
Well, some of them are not government owned.
Okay.
So you know what these guys do? That's the problem, which is they keep some of the free press, or in Ecuador, for example, the press is supposedly free, but laws against the freedom of expression.
They put people in jail.
They put people
who
in
express their
jail,
views.
yes, or they fine people. So there are different ways of acting.
So how can
asphyxia.
how could the United States help make that press?
Well, I
a
think
press more free. in
I'll
those
give you a
countries?
couple of examples. One, I think there's a big role for countries like the States or the European Union or even the Pacific Alliance to strengthen civil society all across Latin America. Because it's civil society, the one that's going to change that circumstance. It's not going to be an AWAC plane with emissions of news programs in a Spanish with U.S. accent.
So what do they do to strengthen civil society?
I think there are many ways to strengthen civil society. There are many organizations in civil society, from unions and teachers and students. Students, for example, in Venezuela have been critical in strengthening the opposition, critical in putting some limits to what the government wants to do, critical in defeating the government in certain referendums.
But what I keep on trying to understand is what can the United States, Congress, President, or non-government organizations, NGOs, what can they do specifically? I understand you're saying there are these opposition groups, there are students, but what can the United States and
but
its
Jeff,
organized
you're
groups do?
looking for a good answer on a unilateral act, and I don't think that's the way. I think there used to be the Organization of the American States that has this the charter, the democratic charter of the Americas, and that used to work. I think it's proven to be useless now. The Organization of American States, or the Americas hemisphere as a whole, has to find ways in which the collectivity, not the U.S., can point out to those countries that are on the offside and can say, that is a moment where you're not protecting the rights of the minorities, you're crossing the line. That is unacceptable. And to have some, I don't know, trade sanctions, but collectively,
So
when
the
you do
US
it
has to be
unilaterally,
part of the OAS or help
It-
with,
it is
or
part
work
of the
with the
OAS.
Pacific Alliance.
I
You're
think
saying they have
that's
to
the
work
way.
multilaterally.
I think the way is to act multilaterally. That has proven it's sometimes very difficult, but I think it's proven to work and to have longer effect rather than unilateral acts. But I think I don't want us to lose like the picture, because I think Latin America in general is a success story right now. It's a good story. 50 to 70 million people have come out of poverty in the last decade. Most of the countries are growing 3, 4, 5% per year, which is not the case in Europe, and it's not the case here.
Right, 2% at best in the United States.
Most of the countries have inflation of 1, 2, 3%. Most of the countries have unemployment of 7, 8%. I mean, we're talking.
So you're talking most countries, not just the Pacific Alliance. You're saying Latin America, South America, it now has a stable. Most of the countries have stable, growing economies.
Yes.
Their median income is still quite a bit less
Yes.
than the United States.
Yes.
But the growth rate in those countries, the economic growth
Yes,
rate,
there are
is exceeding the
many
United
which
States
are an
and Europe.
exception, but the bigger countries are doing fairly well.
And what do you attribute that? Because that wasn't the case 20 or 30 years ago.
Well, I think we were all pretty shielded from the global crisis. We were not shielded in the sense that our biggest buyers were hurt, and if your buyers are hurt,
You're hurt.
you're hurt. But we were shielded because our financial sectors were not involved in the subprime crisis.
Right.
We did not have that.
What are,
We
well,
did not
talk a
have
little
those
bit-
toxic assets.
What are the financial sectors like that are doing well? I mean, you mentioned the number of airplanes that are sold out of Brazil. Is that right?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting story. You know, if you fly an airplane in the U.S. And I'm stealing these examples from my dear friend Peter Schechter from the Latin American Center at the Atlantic Council, and I heard that who was in the seminar today.
Just today,
And
on
it's
December
fascinating
4th.
examples. If you're in the States and you fly less than 300 miles, there's a 7-to-1 chance that you're flying a Brazilian-made plane, Embraer. In the last 40 years, the largest investment in steel, $6.9 billion, has been from an Argentine steel company called Tequint. And there are a bunch of good examples like that.
Is this a reflection of the free market? Are these countries
Yes.
that are doing well?
It's
very
also a
free market?
reflection.
Are you a believer in the free market?
Oh yes.
Okay. And why are you believing in the free market?
Well, because I think that there's good evidence that when the government is all over the place, getting involved in the economy, it doesn't work.
So you know this guy. Should put that up if we can get that.
I know that guy.
Free to Choose by Milton and Rose Friedman is kind of an icon. Of course, he's
Yes.
deceased now, but he was dominant. Well, he was probably the most important economist, Milton Friedman, in the 20th century. Don't you think?
Yes, but I have one. Not
And that book was, of course, Free to Choose. Do you believe in free to choose?
Yes, definitely. But
Okay.
but I have a caveat on
little
the
litmus test,
Friedman U Chicago thing, and this is the following. I think that in Latin America, the state plays a very important role in the protection of the poorest, and it has to have. Because I'll give you an example, in not to talk about Mexico and Brazil, the largest countries in population. Colombia, 45 million people. We've been extremely successful we had, I don't know, 40, 50% of people below the poverty line. We now have 14% of people below the poverty line.
In Colombia?
Yes. Millions of people have gone out of the poverty line in the last 5 to 10 years.
Economic mobility up.
Yes.
And
Millions.
That's a free market
Now,
example.
if you
Isn't that a free market
and it is,
example?
and it is, but now
And I would say,
It
if
is.
you look
No,
at
no.
socialist countries, you don't have that kind of economic
True.
mobility.
yes,
Okay.
but you still have 14% of 45 million people.
Well, as you point out, you
so
want
you
to
still have-
assist people who
Yes,
are low income
exactly.
and help them elevate themselves, work with them
Exactly.
so they can escape poverty.
So I do.
This guy, one thing I'll say, people don't realize, Milton Friedman had the idea of the negative income tax. So instead of having a vast welfare program, If your income is low or non-existent, just like you fill out on a, he would have you fill out on a postcard, a very simple thing, pay your taxes, fill out on a postcard you have no income, and the government will send you money. Because he thought, although people, that's how you instill growth in them. You rely on them to make good choices.
Yes.
You don't, yes, some will make bad choices. So Friedman was a big believer in assisting low-income people and treating them with dignity.
Yeah. Well, in a strange way, some countries do that, but I wonder, you know, direct subsidies to people in that way end up creating a political clientele for Chavez and those
you
guys.
always incentivize, in other words, and when you structure that, so as they make income, they keep a very large portion of it. We sometimes in the United States have a vast array of programs, food stamps, healthcare stamps, other stamps, and so when these people find a job, they start paying 70% of their new income to the government.
Well,
so his idea is incentivize, give people an incentive to get off of the assistance program by always looking at what do they get marginally by getting a job.
Yeah.
I mean, your point was that Latin America is growing rapidly.
Yes.
The economies are doing well.
Yes.
And I simply interjected, and I think in a significant part from also being at your seminars, I picked up a strong belief in the free market, and that the free market in these countries, in Latin and South America, has helped them have high economic growth rates and has helped people escape from poverty.
Yes.
And you agree with all that?
I agree with that.
Okay. And basically,
I also believe that the United States has a role to play, given the size of its economy, in helping these countries with free trade and that.
But you also benefit from imports because
Yes.
if you're able to buy products from the United States at lower prices,
Which-
these individuals
which is the
benefit. It's not,
case,
in fact,
yes.
people would say, although it sounds, you don't hear this commonly, but Friedman would tell you, it's imports that help countries grow much more than exports.
And that's, for example, Colombia signed a free trade agreement with the United States exactly because of that.
Well, I very much want to thank Miguel Silva. He, of course, as I said, works as the chief of staff to the president of Colombia. He's been involved in the media. He's, for the last 10 years, been involved in political consulting, had his own firm, now is part of a larger firm. But most importantly, for the last 10 weeks, he's been a fellow at the Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago. And everybody should come down here and visit the Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago. And when you do that, whether you go to a seminar, to a speaker's program, whether you get yourself or your kids involved in internships, you walk up to David Axelrod and you said, Jeff Berkowitz sent you. All right, thanks so
Thank
much,
you,
Miguel.
Jeff. Thanks very much.
Or Miguel Silva sent you. All right, come on. When you come back to Chicago, you come back and see
I
us.
will
okay?
definitely. Thank you, Jeff.
All right.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.